I love you so much. I love you so much. Mr. Cunningham Craig's oil Mr. Cunningham Craig's oil finding is a laudable and successful attempt to deal with a subject which has hitherto received far too little attention, and those who have within recent years had occasion to deplore the waste of money which has resulted from the publication of injudicious reports on lands presumed to be oil-bearing, and from the unscientific manner in which drilling operations have been conducted, will regret that this book was not published long ago. The author points out that the foundation of the successful petroleum enterprise must be laid by the geologist rather than by the engineer. And he states that the present work has been written for geologists and especially for young geologists, but it may be added that, to a large extent, the views expressed are couched in language so free from technicalities that the work may be studied with profit by a far wider circle, including, in fact, all those who are interested in the petroleum industry, either in an administrative capacity or as investors. With the aid of this book and the exercise of common sense, those who contemplate investment in petroleum undertakings may place themselves in a position to form an independent opinion as to whether the technical data given in a prospectus are adequate and are such as to justify the appeal for subscriptions. Similarly, the shareholders in petroleum projects which are of an exploratory nature, or in which the work of exploitation is passing through the earlier stages, may learn to interpret reports of progress which at present they find unintelligible. Not only would this enlightened judgment be of inestimable value to those who exercise it, but it would incidentally provide the most effective remedy for an evil to which the author alludes, viz., that of the popular safeguarded report, which in lieu of being a record of facts and legitimate deduction, seeks to create a highly favorable impression by means of a few well-rounded sentences in which the weak points of the case are ignored and superlatives are prominent. It is obvious that the possession by those to whom such reports are intended to appeal of such knowledge as Mr. Cunningham Craig's book imparts would very soon result in rendering this procedure worse than useless. And in this connection, it should be borne in mind that the expert is not alone to blame For as the author points out, it not infrequently happens that his views are quoted in a form in which they do not correctly convey what he stated. The earlier portion of the work, as the author himself admits, deals with many theoretical questions of a controversial character. And it is not to be expected, nor does he himself anticipate, that his strongly expressed opinions will in all cases be accepted. But this does not detract from the value of the work, and in fact it may be said to enhance it if, in accordance with the avowed intention of the author, the further study of these questions is thereby stimulated. Mr. Cunningham Craig, in his concluding remarks, modestly disclaims originality for the last 2 chapters of this work, and further indicates elsewhere that these chapters are intended for beginners, but the dominant feature of the whole work may be said to be the boldness and originality of treatment of the subject. And there is much in the advice which he gives to beginners which may be studied with advantage by those who have that lengthy experience. B.R. This little book does not pretend to be a treatise upon petroleum, nor even to exhaust the particular circumscribed branch of the subject with which it deals. Petroleum and the search for petroleum have recently bulked largely in the public eye. Discoveries all over the world have proved the widespread occurrence of mineral oils. The demand for them has stimulated and to some extent created active search for and development of petroliferous areas, and it has become increasingly evident not only to the scientific but also to the commercial world that it is to the geologist rather than to the engineer that one must look in the first instance if successful results are to be achieved. Much has been written in late years upon the subject of petroleum, but very little that is of service to the practical field geologist. Speculative and more or less theoretical work by indoor students of the subject is available in abundance, while the practical world of oil fields has been in most cases conducted by what have been known by a curious distinction, too frequently heard even nowadays as, quote, practical, unquote, as contrasted with or even opposed to scientific men. Consequently, many facts of vital importance and many generalizations reached by long experience never see the light in publications accessible to the scientific student of the subject. It is hardly too much to say that so much nonsense has been written and published about oil or particular oil fields that many vague but essentially erroneous ideas are current, if not actually accepted. In many otherwise excellent works on the subject, geology is dismissed in a few carefully guarded and colorless paragraphs, or at the best in a chapter or 2, while such data as statistics are given a prominence which is more acceptable to the commercial than to the scientific world. Similarly, geographical data are set forth at length, and geological maps are rarities. It is to fill up a few of the blanks left by previous authors that this book has been written. It is for geologists, and more especially for young geologists, in the hope that it may prove of value to those who may have to undertake exploration work for a mineral which is not naturally familiar to the stay-at-home Briton. The author is quite aware that his knowledge of petroleum is limited, but in the few not unimportant fields that have come within his ken, a thorough and intimate knowledge has been obtained, and he has been able to study the subject in these fields in a manner for which neither the practical prospector, nor field manager, nor the peripatetic expert has time. Also, in these few fields, he has had an opportunity not only of observing almost all the different environments in which petroleum occurs, and many grades and classes of oils, but also of having brought to his notice nearly every kind of mistake that prospectors or experts with a merely nodding acquaintance with geology can make. In attempting the development of a new field, theoretical matters will perforce have to be treated of or touched on here and there. But for the most part, the notes that follow are a record of facts, solely and often laboriously collected. During detailed geological field mapping, with the conclusions to which these facts inevitably point, the author has taken a somewhat uncompromising standpoint with regard to some of the main theoretical questions still under controversy. It is largely with the intention of stimulating discussion upon them and the search for and bringing forward of new and incontrovertible evidence. I am indebted to Messrs. Robert Lunn and J. Ness of H.M. Geological Survey for help in the preparation of the illustrations, and my thanks are due to Messrs. C.S. Rogers, Monsieur Kruliansky, G.B. Reynolds, S. Lister James, and Professor J. Cadman, who have kindly allowed me to publish photographs of geological interest which they have taken. April 1912. E.H. Cunningham. E.H.C. Cunningham. Oil Finding, Chapter 1, The Origin of Petroleum. It has been the custom in It has been the custom in treatises upon petroleum, the one bright exception being the work of Engler and Hoffer, to regard the origin of the mineral as an interesting academic but unimportant question which is fully dealt with when the various theories have been stated. The least popular summarily dismissed, and a few pages of carefully guarded general statements written round about without ever touching the root of the matter. That this unsatisfactory state of things has arisen from lack of definite information on definite points is the misfortune rather than the fault of the authors, but all geologists will agree that to leave a question of such vital importance unsettled is to blindfold the student or prospector at the very start. How, if one does not know or cannot prove from what material and under what conditions petroleum is formed, can one tell where to look for it, or even be confident as to its presence beneath the surface? This question of origin, in fact, absorbs and includes nearly every other question as to the occurrence, distribution, and winning of oil. The theories that have been brought forward from time to time to account for the origin of petroleum and its congeners divide themselves naturally into two classes, which again may be subdivided as follows. A. Inorganic origin. 1. Hypogene causes. 2. Volcanic action. B. Organic origin from animal matter. 2. From something matter. Theories of the inorganic origin of petroleum are essentially the ideas of chemists and indoor students of the subject. They are founded on assumptions and built up by theoretical considerations, none of which have been tested by application to actual facts and conditions as observed in nature. 1. The most ingenious of the hypogene theories suggests the origin of petroleum by the condensing and isomerization of hydrocarbons formed by the action of water upon supposititious masses of metallic carbides deep within the crust of the earth. Such vague hypotheses are almost invariably rejected nowadays, and it is needless to enter upon a detailed examination of the various arguments pro and con. The conditions under which petroleum is found in nature furnish sufficient grounds for the dismissal of any theory involving a deep-seated origin. Two. Volcanic action has occasionally been suggested to be responsible in some ill-defined way for the occurrence of petroleum. At first sight, there appears to be some direct evidence favorable to this idea. For instance, oil fields are found in major parts of the world at no great distance from and even running parallel with lines of volcanic activity. Japan and Sakhalin, Mexico, Burma, and the West Indies are cases in point. Again, mud volcanoes of sulfuritic type and evidence of undoubted volcanic action, usually in the obsolescent stage, have been confused with mud volcanoes due to the discharge of gas from underlying oil rocks. These are two entirely different phenomena, but if no distinction be made between them, it might be erroneously claimed that there is evidence of volcanic action in very many oil fields. When the question is examined in detail, it is seen that both the lines of volcanic activity and the structures which are conducive to the formation and storage of petroleum are merely separate and independent effects of the same cause. Volcanic lines are developed near to or along the margins of continental masses, or more correctly, between continents and deep oceanic basins. That is to say, in belts where active earth movement is taking place. Many oil fields also lie along belts where active earth movements have been experienced. But there is no evidence to suggest that the volcanicity and the formation of petroleum are essentially connected in any way. The distribution of land and water may be vastly different now from what it was when active volcanicity obtained. And it can frequently be proved that the oil was formed before volcanicity commenced, and may have remained after all such action has ceased. Interesting evidence of this nature is to be obtained in Burma and Barbados. To go into the matter more closely, it is difficult for a geologist to realize exactly what those authors who have promulgated the idea of volcanic origin of petroleum really mean by volcanic action. As evidence, they bring forward the well-known cases of distillation caused by the intrusion of igneous rocks through such strata as the coal measures or the Scottish oil shales, phenomena which are not necessarily connected with true volcanic action. That such local distillation has frequently taken place is proved by abundant evidence, and the igneous rock may be found to contain in small cavities soft or elastic bituminous compounds. In Fife and in the Karoo, South Africa, such evidence may be obtained. These effects, however, are purely local, and no instance of such action on a large scale has been brought forward. The limits of the distilling action are usually well defined. Even were such evidence on a large scale available, the occurrence of the bituminous compounds only demonstrates the presence of organic matters contained within the sedimentary strata so affected, and the igneous action may be considered the origin, but merely the process which has happened to call attention to the potentially bituminous nature of the strata. That volcanoes themselves should produce petroleum has not been suggested, since in spite of the minute care with which volcanoes have been studied, no observer has obtained evidence favorable to such an hypothesis. In no large and productive oil fields have igneous rocks, either intrusive or volcanic, been encountered to any considerable extent, and to use the term volcanic action in a vague sense to account for phenomena which are not associated with any such action is merely to beg the question, and at the same time to disregard a mass of relevant evidence which has been gradually accumulated ever since petroleum first became of commercial importance. B. Organic origin. In considering the theories of the formation of petroleum from organic matter, it is necessary to examine a vast mass of evidence, chemical, geological, and experimental. The views of many experts are still undecided, and the relative importance of animal or vegetable matter as the material from which petroleum and petroleum compounds can be formed is a question that is handled very gingerly in recent publications. Yet, as stated above, and it cannot be stated too often and too strongly, unless we can make up our minds upon this question, the search for new oil fields must necessarily become to some extent a groping in the dark. Before asking himself if there is oil to be found in any district or locality, the geologist must consider why there should or should not be oil, how it could have reached such an environment, and whether it can be relied upon to be present. If drilled for to enter into such inquiries without knowing from what material the oil has been formed is to adventure upon a search with one eye bandaged. The question is not merely of academic, but of great practical importance, and it is in the author's experience that great sums of money have been fruitlessly thrown away by petroleum companies solely because those responsible for the selection of possible new fields to be tested had not mastered the first essential question of the origin of petroleum. B. 1. Animal origin. The theory that petroleum is formed by the decomposition or destructive distillation of animal matter entombed in the strata has many adherents. At the present day, it has arisen largely from the wish to find a marine origin that will be acceptable to scientists. As oil occurs in sedimentary strata, and most sedimentary strata are to some extent at least marine in origin, there was a natural tendency to seek for some mode of origin for petroleum compatible with the manner of accumulation of ordinary sedimentary rocks. The evidence upon which this theory rests is largely chemical, many chemists having conducted researches with the object of ascertaining whether oils with the characteristics of natural petroleum can be formed from animal matter. Let it be granted at once that under conditions easily reproducible in a chemical laboratory, animal matter of almost every kind can be decomposed and separated out into various classes of compounds, some of which can, when properly treated, be converted into mixtures of oils closely resembling petroleum as found in nature. The chemical processes can be expressed roughly and generally as, first, the elimination of nitrogen and nitrogen compounds, and then a destructive distillation of the fats to form mixtures of hydrocarbons. With the actual processes employed, it is not necessary to deal in detail. The reader is referred to the work of Engler and Hoffa, and of others who have made the possibility of the extraction of oils from animal matter abundantly clear. This possibility being accepted, many authors, pointing to the indubitable evidence of the former existence of living organisms among the strata in which petroleum is now found, seem to consider that further proof is unnecessary. Each author has probably his favorite class or order of organism which he could make responsible for the raw material in each particular oil field of which he has special knowledge. Thus, at one time or another, almost every class of organism, from the fish of Mr. Winda, the Russian geologist, to the diatoms and foraminifera of the United States Geological Survey, California, Texas, and Louisiana oil fields, has had special attention drawn to it in this connection. Sometimes the chemical theorists carry their speculations even further and suggest that the characteristics of the oils formed, e.g., whether of paraffin or asphaltic base, may be determined by the nature of the raw material. Of the geological evidence, however, little that will bear careful scrutiny has been adduced to support the animal origin theory. A statement such as the following: this series is oil-bearing, and at intervals throughout in the hard parts of animal organisms are found, seems to be regarded by many as sufficient evidence upon which to base a generalization of such enormous importance. Again, the occurrence of oil in limestones is often brought forward as a clinching argument even by the authors who perhaps in the next chapter deal with the migration of petroleum through vast thicknesses of strata and its appearance naturally in the most porous rock available. Here, one will say, is a coral limestone formed chiefly of the debris of coral and other organisms, often in the position of growth, and it is impregnated with petroleum, leaving it to be inferred that the oil has been formed from the soft parts of the coral polyps, and oblivious of the fact that a similar argument might be made to apply to a recent beach full of shell fragments and similarly impregnated, such as may be seen in many localities in the island of Trinidad. The geologist, however, demands more detailed and definite evidence. The geologist, however, demands more detailed and definite evidence. It is not enough for him to know where the oil is found. He must assure himself on many points, such as the lateral and vertical distribution of the petroleum. In a geological series, the conditions under which the series has been deposited, the manner in which sufficient raw material to form the oil has been accumulated, and the process by which the oil has been concentrated and brought to its present position. When such questions are gone into carefully, one possibility after another is disposed of, and by a process of elimination, an inevitable conclusion is finally reached. In such inquiries, the golden rule is never to postulate or suggest any condition or any mode of deposition or accumulation which cannot be shown or proved to be actually in operation at the present day. It is by the study of the present that the secrets of the past